I've simulated the Rugby World Cup 100 times on Rugby Challenge 4, just so you don't have to. And today, I'm going to be sharing the results of those simulations with you all to see who should be the favourite to win the Rugby World Cup. Now, how I did this was pretty simple. All the teams being updated to the named 33 men's squads from the last few weeks building up to the World Cups. The pools have been aligned inside a pre-made competition on the game to make the Rugby World Cup as close to real as possible from the game. It took a lot of numbers, it took a lot of Excel sheets, and it's taken a lot of time. This gives us some incredible data, and by the end of this video, you should know, according to Rugby Challenge 4, who's going to be the favourites to win the Rugby World Cup. Also, who's going to suck the most at the Rugby World Cup, who's going to flop the most at the Rugby World Cup, and who will excel, I hate that word now, at the Rugby World Cup. And who, of course, has that 1 in 100 chance to win the 2023 Rugby World Cup in France. So let's crack on into the information from these simulations, and let's start out at the bottom by finding out who were the 4 worst teams in the Rugby World Cup this year. So we kick things off in Pool C, where it's our 4th worst team of the World Cup simulations, and that goes to Portugal, who will probably be pretty happy with the fact they've actually come in not the worst and up the table a little bit. You can see by this table here, they finished 5th. They're the worst team in the division, but they weren't really that bad when you consider the fact that they actually pulled out over an average of 4 points per World Cup, almost 1 win per simulation, and they're pretty good at picking up at least almost a bonus point as well. What really let them down was their defence, and they were averaging the worst points differential in the league, getting pounded up by nearly 42 points on average per World Cup. They put in a close competition with Georgia, who also struggled in this pool as well, but they were nearly a full point ahead of them on average, picking up a slightly higher chance of a win and also a bit higher chance of picking up that bonus point as well. But it was a real battle down the bottom, and Portugal, I think, should be pretty proud of how they've come out of this one. Now, the 3rd worst team in the Rugby World Cup simulations were Uruguay. Quite surprising this one. I thought Uruguay would make 4th place their own quite comfortably and really set about some competition for the Italians and likes in front of them, but that wasn't the case. Again, much like Pool C, there was a real battle between the 4th and 5th teams here, with Namibia and Uruguay battling it out. You can see just how close this was between the two sides. Averaging 2.95 points were the Uruguayans, 3rd worst at the Rugby World Cup, but not too far ahead of them were the Namibians. Just again, the extra chance of picking up a victory, although they were down on the bonus point, so Uruguay often didn't lose as badly, as you can tell by the points differential. Minus 59 as compared to Namibia, who generally went for 70 plus points per World Cup. But at the end of the day, they had their higher chance of picking up the win, which got them just that nudge in front over the 100 cycles. Now we move on to the 2nd worst team at the Rugby World Cup, and I bet you this team was most people's favourite to be the worst side at the Rugby World Cup. But no, Romania have done very well to make sure that they are 1 spot off that coveted prize. We'll take it whatever it is. But they have finished 5th in their pool, and quite convincingly as well. The gap between them and Tonga, who regularly finished in 4th position, is quite considerable. Nearly 4 points difference between the Romanians and the Tongans on average. And you can see just by the wins, just by the points conceded, just by both of those sides, there was a massive difference between the two. On average, Romania finished 5th most of the time. 4.8 was the average finish, which saw not many times that they were managed to pluck themselves out of that 5th position. The Tongans, however, did pretty well, averaged over a win, which again generally was over the Romanians, but they played well enough. They got themselves some chances throughout the tournament, and as expected, the bottom 2 have gone as they were. But Romania wasn't the worst, which surprises me, I guess, along with a lot of you as well. But who was the worst team at the Rugby World Cup? We head off to Pool D, where we see Chile. Unfortunately for Chile, it just was not their World Cup, finishing just 19% of the time with 1 victory. They hardly ever got a bonus point as well, and averaged just 1.6 points per cycle. That means one win would do them over 2 World Cups before they needed to pick up another one or even another point. They were terribly poor. They conceded a hell of a lot of points. Not as many as Namibia though, who are up in the 70s. Chile just down in the 60s. But a very tough group though. You've got to give it to them as well. With the likes of Japan, who were their next closest rivals. Yeah, that's right. Japan seeded in the top 2 at the World Cup draw. Nah. They finished way down in 4th on average, but considerably higher than the Chilean squad, who were just out of their depth. And the Japanese made sure that they always picked up that one win per World Cup. Now, this is a tournament that very much has a split between the top 2 or 3 and the bottom couple as well. And we start off here with Argentina when we look at our best teams throughout the 2023 Rugby World Cup. And they come in at the 4th position as the 4th best team to perform out of the Rugby World Cup. What does that mean for you English fans? Well, it's bad news, as the English were put under the pump multiple times by the Argentinians and even by the Samoans quite a number of times as well. You can see here on the graph, the English did alright. They scored good points, but they did fall to conceding one defeat generally per World Cup cycle. The Samoans, you can see here, were very good at enforcing a draw. Generally, it was against Japan as well, as those two battled out between 3rd and 4th. You see the points between Japan and Samoa very close, just over 2 points on average, whereas a jump up to the 13.96 that the English typically average over the World Cups. Argentina, though, a good streak ahead, 14.39. They average pretty much 3 wins per tournament and a good point dosage as well of pretty much 35 points. A couple of bonus points always chipped in on average, and the English were right behind them. This was a pool that was really, really close. But the fact of the matter is that Argentina were the 4th best team in the league at just 14 points per average per cycle. There was much better to be seen throughout the Rugby World Cup. So I'm going to skip the 3rd best team in the Rugby World Cup and go straight on to the 2nd best team of the Rugby World Cup. If you're smart, you'll probably figure out where this one is going straight away. And it is to Pool B we go, where we see South Africa and Ireland in a battle with Scotland. I tell you what, this one was engrossing. You will see later on when we take a look at the finals just how much these 3 sides went hammer and tong, game after game after game, and this order was all over the show every single time we simulated this World Cup. South Africa, though, did the deed, did the job convincingly as well. 16.66 points on average each World Cup. Now, that's pretty much 4 wins without the bonus points, but they generally picked up near 3 bonus points per cycle as well. 3.4 wins, they didn't need to worry about draws and hardly ever suffered a loss. They were pretty much always top of the table, or they did suffer without getting in the playoffs a couple of times throughout those cycles. Again, we'll see those in a moment. But Ireland, I think many people's favourites to win this World Cup as well, struggled to deal with the South Africans, and often when you focus too much on one team, they fell to the Scottish, who were very, very valiant, as you can see by their stats in 3rd position. Pretty much always picking up the win against Tonga and Romania. They pushed hard against the Irish especially, and often they pushed them down to 3rd position. They were good at picking up bonus points, much better than the Irish as well, and finished nicely, always generally in the double figures for the points differences. 2 heavyweights of the Rugby World Cup went head to head there. The plucky Scottish were right behind them, but the big boys were yet to be seen. Were they coming from Pool C? Well, let's be honest. Australia, Eddie Jones, honestly. Gatland, Wales? No. Just no. The heavy hits instead come from Pool A, where we saw New Zealand and France go to battle every single time. New Zealand top, France top, New Zealand top, France top, over and over. Those two were relentless. Spare 4 for Italy. You know, they were just 3rd. Convincingly better than Namibia and Uruguay, and no chance at ever taking out France or New Zealand. They did get their moments, however, but they're not going to be the focus here. The fact of the matter is that France, who on average finished 2nd in Pool A, still managed to average a higher points tally at the end of the group stage than any team in Pool C. Eddie Jones, you can go back to your negativity because your team has just been flat out of the picture, but we'll still have a look at Pool C in just a moment. The All Blacks, though, and the French were 2 of the best teams in the competition. The number 1 was New Zealand. France, the 3rd most successful side, considering points on the board on average. They were great. I mean, and they really did dismantle their oppositions. Uruguay and Namibia didn't stand a chance. Italy very rarely did anything brilliant, and that really tells out through the stats. The fact of the matter that Italy always lost 2 games, and they always won 2 games. A little shimmy either way every now and then, but overall, it was always status quo. 1 and 2, 3 was the same, 4 and 5, like we all expected. Some interesting stats though, like we saw with the points for Namibia. I think the Italians certainly didn't stand up defensively against the top 2 sides or put away the last place sides as much as they would have liked. Struggled to get bonus points and didn't even get into the double figure average like we saw from the Scottish and teams like that who were really pushing forward against those top 2 teams. But here we go, let's take a look at the Gatlin versus Eddie Jones battle. It's the old man versus the young men, and the youngest team versus the grandpas of Gatlin's crew. This was a pool that was just a disaster, and let's be honest, Fiji pretty much licked their lips a good portion of these times and took one of those top 2 places away from both Wales and from Australia. You can see by this, I don't think it tells a full story about how just often Fiji managed to make their way into the playoffs. On average, they finished 2.61, so about 2.5, so they're 50-50 in swapping between those top 2 places with Wales and Australia. What led them down? I guess they didn't score enough points, they didn't get enough bonus points, but they averaged 11, which really put them right up there. But the closeness between Wales and Australia, 14.7 to 14.09, that was a real battle between Gatlin and Jones, between the Wallabies and Wales. It really was an enticing one to see. Wales picked it up though. Generally, they did a little bit more consistently better in finishing in that top spot. The Wallabies quite often dropped down that ladder to 3rd or even 4th position when the Georges decided they wanted to turn up as well. But Wales certainly had their off days. As you can see, they didn't score as many points on average as the better teams in the league, and we'll see in just a moment when we look at the finals, they didn't turn up there as often either. But you got to say, out of all those times, they picked up at least 3 wins, which puts them in good position to always qualify. And that, at the end of the day, is the main part of the game. So with the pool stages all done and dusted now, we can move forward into the finals and see who is going to make their claim to be the Rugby World Cup champion in 2023. Straight away, we can eliminate 4 teams from the bottom who didn't even make the quarterfinals once. That's right, bye-bye Romania, bye-bye Chile, bye-bye Portugal, and bye-bye Uruguay. Now you may be thinking, what about Namibia? Why aren't they in that group? Well, simply put, they made it once. That's all you need to do, just once. They made it once into a quarterfinal, properly smashed and sent back home. But they'll take that 1 in 100 chance that Namibia could make it. I know, it's ridiculous. France or New Zealand and Italy have to miss out. One of those or 2 of those 3 have to miss out. But Namibia, they did it once, and once was enough. Another team that will be a bit shocking that they've actually made it that far that you may be thinking about is Georgia. They did it once as well. And you know what else they did? They didn't make it just to the quarterfinals. Oh no, they went one step more. They made it to a semi-final of the Rugby World Cup. Georgia really going to turn up when they want to turn up. We start moving into the teams that more consistently made it in there, not just a shock. The Tongans did it 6 times to the quarterfinals, but never went further than that, unlike their Georgian buddies who at least did it once into the semi-finals. Up from there, we've got Italy. Yeah, they did it 10 times. That means 10 times they managed to make sure New Zealand or France didn't make it to those quarterfinals. Japan managed to do it 22 times of their 100 opportunities, and just 3 of those were converted into semi-final opportunities. Now, let's get into the big boys. Those chaps all down: Japan, Italy, Tonga, Georgia, Namibia, Uruguay, Portugal, Chile, and Romania did not win a Rugby World Cup. There was none of this for them, none of it at all. But the rest of these boys, oh, there's some hope. Now, we talked about that 1 in 100 chance for someone to lift the William Webb Ellis Trophy. Well, for Samoa, that exactly was the case. 1 in 100 chance they got that job done. The Samoan team made the quarterfinals 41% of the time. They made it through to the semi-finals 11% of the time. And you know what? You know what's even better than all of that? They made it to the final once. They won the final once. Now that is a conversion rate. Who did they beat? Well, it was Gatlin and his Welsh boys, so let's be honest, it was a pretty weak World Cup final. Moving up from them, we've got the Scottish. Now, amazingly about this, and this goes to show the strength and the irregularities of the pool, they actually made the quarterfinals less than Samoa. Just 34% of the time, Scotland made it to the finals. Although 12% of the time they made it to the semi-finals, and 7% of the time they made it to the final. Unfortunately for them, they couldn't even convert half of them, winning just 3 World Cups from their 7 grand final appearances. But they'll still take that. 100 chances, you get 3. That has got to be good for the Scots. Moving up from there, you may have forgotten about them now because we're starting to talk about the boys with better chances. But Fiji, yeah, we've still not covered Fiji yet. They made it into the quarterfinals 40% of the time. Semi-finals, a rapid 13%, moving up even more likely than Scotland and, of course, Samoa. They made it to the final, though, just 3% of the time, which is a bit sad considering you look at the Scots, who got their 7. But from those 3 opportunities, the Fijians punched above their weight, picking up 2 William Webhouse trophies on the way. And any of you from the fair land of England, the Queen can't save you anymore in more ways than one. Although you did get to the finals 61% of the time into the quarters and 33% of the time into the semi-finals, you made the final just 4 times. And we'll give you that 50-50. You won it twice. Fiji, they've got your number. Scotland, they bettered you. Look out though, Samoa is right on your tail. England had a shocker because even Wales did better. They made the quarterfinals 84% of the time. Weaker pool? Call it what you will, but they did the job there. 35% of the time they made it to the semi-finals, and from that, 10 appearances in the World Cup final. Unfortunately though, for the Welsh, they only won it 3 times. So that's a pretty poor return of just 30% of your World Cup chances in a final turning into the trophies. Now their pool mates Australia and Pool C made it there 75% of the time into the quarterfinals. Again, those 2 sides dominated that quarterfinal qualification. Now they dropped off a big way, struggling to just 20% into the semi-finals, and again, just 7% into the grand final. Much the same as Scotland, they also picked up 3 trophies from their 7 chances in the big dance. Now we go up a gear to a team that really, I think, punched above their weight. Argentina, the Pumas. Yeah, Michael Cheika, he'll be loving this. 76% of the time, his team made it through as not the top 2 seed, but they got there anyway as the 3rd seed in that pool. 76% of the time, moving into the semi-finals, 32% of the time. The grand final, 9% of the time. That's 9 finals for the Argentinians. Unfortunately though, 9 finals and again, a 30% success rate, just 3 Rugby World Cups for the Pumas, but that's still a good chance for a team making it to the semi-finals. A 30% chance, I'm sure that is something they will definitely take if they can. Okay, so now we're moving into the big boys, and it's good to see that Rugby Challenge hasn't lost the big 4 of the Rugby World Cup. Of course, we've still got New Zealand and France out of Pool A. We've got South Africa from Pool B, along with their pool mates Ireland as well. Everyone from C and D is gone. They're out of here. They've not won more than 3 World Cups between all of those sides at their very, very best. But picking up 4th place for the most Rugby World Cups is Ireland. Yep, they've not done as well as many people may be predicting that they should. 70% of the time they made it into the quarterfinals. That tough group with South Africa and with Scotland again, who really put the pressure on. Remember, Scotland made it to the quarterfinals 34% of the time. Ireland had to commit to that somehow, and they only managed to do it 70%. They made it though to the semis 32% of the times that they actually got their act together. Grand final appearance though, this was a very, very good level to keep it at. 20%. 32 to 20, there's a good chance if they do make it to the semis, they are going to the grand final. And they had one of the best records as well of making it to a grand final 20 times. They won the World Cup 15 times out of their 20 appearances. That is a pretty good knock, and it gives them a 15% chance of winning the Rugby World Cup this year. Okay, in your top 3 now, we've got number 3, France. The hosts are coming in at 3rd. These are the big boys now. Let's be honest, these numbers are huge. 93% of the time. 93. That is just 7 times that France failed out of 100 to make the quarter-finals of the Rugby World Cup. They made the semi-finals 70% of the time. So again, that's just 30 times out of 100 that they didn't make the semi-finals, the top 4 of the competition. Into the final, they did that 42% of the time. A huge turnaround, a great effort from France, who then turned in the near 50% conversion rate to win 20 Rugby World Cups. Out of 42 attempts, we'll take that as pretty much half for the hosts. Now, our last 2 teams really dominated the World Cup, consistently in finals, consistently topping pools, and consistently dominating the other teams in World Rugby. But one stood far above the rest, and I can tell you now, it's not the All Blacks. No, they are number 2, the second most successful side in the Rugby World Cup simulation by Rugby Challenge 4. They did, however, make the quarterfinals 96% of the time. That is crazy. 4 times they failed to make the quarterfinals. They then turned on a pretty similar approach to the semis as France, picking up 71 appearances from their 100 and then turned out 47 times for the grand final. They picked up slightly more cups than France, picking up 23 William Webb Ellis trophies from their 100 World Cups and 47 appearances in the grand final. Of course, that leaves just one team at the top, and for all you South Africans, you better love it because your boys, the Springboks, have done it. They are the number 1 team according to Rugby Challenge 4. That's right, they didn't get the quarterfinals as often as either France or New Zealand, just 90% of the time that they made it into the quarters. That's still pretty good, just 10 times missed out of 100 attempts. Into the semi-finals, again, down on France, down on New Zealand, just 68% of the time that they made it to the semis. But their drop-off from semis to final was nowhere near as extravagant as the other 2 from Pool A. 50% of the Rugby World Cups featured South Africa in the grand final. 50%. That is 50 World Cups they had a chance to win. And you know what they did? You know what they did? They exactly split that sucker in half and won 25 of the damn things. That's right, Springboks, 100 World Cups, 25 trophies. They are the favourites, according to Rugby Challenge 4, to pick up the William Webb Ellis Trophy in France this year. As expected, all the action came out of Pool A and Pool B, with the top 4 sides making their way through there significantly higher than any other team from any other pool. The surprise package, Argentina, I guess, considering they weren't a top 2 seed in that pool with Japan and with England, but they've managed to still come out and be one of the better of the rest, picking up 3 World Cups from their efforts. The big surprise for me was Samoa. The fact that they managed to get through to a final, let alone win it, is just an extraordinary effort from them, and they will be stoked if they could actually get anywhere near that sort of closeness. The disappointments, well, it's the ones we expected. England, Wales, Australia, just not at their level, not quite good enough, and Scotland really showed them that they are up to that level now of Tier 1 rugby. Namibia as well, making that one claim to a quarter-final that will be in the record books forever for Namibian rugby. But aside from that, it's pretty much as we expected. Any one of those top 4 could be the ones to do the job in France over the next 2 months' time. And finally, before I let you all go with the information about the Rugby World Cup, I did run 3 extra little lines of stats that you may be interested in throughout this Rugby World Cup. Leading try scorer, leading point scorer, and red cards. That one, that's the real interesting one for me. So start things off with your leading try scorer. You know how Rugby Challenge 4 plays. It's not really the player, it's more the number, but they averaged over the 100 simulations, the top try scorer, just under 6 tries per tournament. Stephen Kitshoff was the most common name, I know, to appear in the leading try scorer format. 5.45 was his magic number throughout the middle, but there was a lot of cool names that showed up throughout. Guys like Fakuli, halfpenny pitched in as well, Sanchez, Carreras from Argentina, Poreki in there as well as Ethan de Groot a couple of times, and the front row partner of Kitchoff, Franz Maholba, also picked up a couple of those. We also seen players like Ryan from Ireland pick up some as well. Sanchez grabbed himself a few as well, so he can pick up the leading point scorer, which we'll have a look at next. But a whole stack of players, very, very rarely more than one time it come up, but it was Kitchoff who picked it up about 5 times throughout the 100 simulations of the leading try scorer. Moving into the leading point scorer, and it was another Springbok. No surprise, they were the best performing team, most World Cups, one of the best out of their pool, and it was Damian Willemse who actually picked up the leading point scorer. Why is kicking? Why is Libbok not kicking? Because Marnie Libbok also picked up the leading point scorer a number of times for the Springboks. Tries? Is it just that? Or is it kicks as well? Is it changes, substitutes, rotations? The squad selections were on automatic, so they're AI controlled. But it was Damian Willemse who was the most common to pick up the leading point scorer award. Second very closely by Richie Mo'unga. And then, of course, Jalabert as well from France also picked up a number of them. They averaged just under 90 points, about 88.5 over the 100 simulations for all players, and there was a stack of names again. Sanchez jumped up in there, Sexton a few times, Farrell got there once, mainly because he was probably suspended more often than he was actually out there on the paddock. Other names that popped up in there, a couple for Finn Russell, a couple more for Sexton, Muntz from Fiji also jumped in there with a couple, Halfpenny, nabbed some for Wales as well, but your big boys mainly wrapped it up. Your Mo'ungas, your Willemses, your Halaberts, those were the big boys for the leading point scorer. Okay, now this is the big one, and there was a couple of coincidences that happened with these red card numbers that I just had to laugh at. And most notably, if England went deep in the Rugby World Cup, the red card numbers were between 13 and 15, which is as high as they got. If they went very shallow, the red card numbers were down, the likes of 7, 8, and the likes down there. Very, very intriguing results. Although you can't relate that specifically without seeing every single simulation, but on average, there was 10.2 red cards per Rugby World Cup cycle. That's a total over 100 simulations of 1,020 red cards throughout the Rugby World Cup. An insane number of cards and an insane number of suspensions as well, no doubt about that. So we're looking at about 5.5 tries for the leading try scorer, about high 80s for the leading point scorer, and about just over 10 average red cards per tournament. Those are some numbers to look for if you're a betting man for the Rugby World Cup and you trust Rugby Challenge 4, which honestly, I don't know if I would. What did you think about the stats? What did you think about the numbers? And what are your thoughts about the Rugby World Cup? If there is any other little bits and pieces of stats, you can see probably in the start here, I'll edit in some little shots of the whole stats that were made for this. Every World Cup was documented with wins, points differentials, what stage of the World Cup they got through to, the average points, average placings. You saw all the stats here. It's all averaged out over 100 simulations of the Rugby World Cup on Rugby Challenge 4. It took a damn long time, so I hope you guys really enjoyed it. It's a little light-hearted look at how the Rugby World Cup may go this year. So I hope you're liking it. Let me know your thoughts and anything else you'd like to see. I can surely show you and bring it to you as well. But from me, thank you for tuning and watching. Hope you've enjoyed this little video, and I hope it gives you a little bit of fun and excitement for the Rugby World Cup in just a couple of days' time. Until next time, though, thanks for tuning in. As always, big thanks for the supporters for keeping the channel operational and running, and I'll see you all next time for plenty more about the Rugby World Cup and, of course, rugby as well. Until then, though, take care.